First of all, she said, these are things we know. These are things we know are true. She said that Mr. Bass left the children home alone in their beds. So they're in their beds, and he leaves. There's no evidence of that. You didn't hear any evidence that they were in their beds when he left. He followed Shirley Bass. We have an hour later with his car supposedly leaving, a Nissan Titan design, but he followed her. There's not one shred of evidence of that. To confront Shirley for going to a family dinner is why he supposedly stopped them along on the way onto 275 at the West Shore exit. You heard not one piece of evidence that he stopped the vehicle. And we're going to talk more about that later. But that it was to confront Shirley for going to the dinner? No, we didn't hear any evidence whatsoever about why or why not Mr. Bass did not go to the dinner. The children were laying down, we know that. Well, then why do we have bullet holes higher up? We don't know that. Miss Reeder actually said,
True.
quote, read between the lines. Do you remember when she just said that in her argument? Read between the lines. Let's forget about evidence. Let's forget about burden of proof. Let's throw it all out the window, folks. Just read between the lines and convict a person of murder. She went through this long, elongated theory, and I think it was done multiple times, that Mr. Bass got the gun. He put bullets in it. He put the magazine in. He racked it. He took
There's
it into
no
his
evidence of
room.
that.
What
I
evidence
agree.
Did you hear about any of that? You heard not one piece of evidence of where that gun was prior to the shooting of the children. You heard nothing. We do not know. You don't read between the lines in a case such as this or in any case. There is absolutely no evidence that the state has presented where that gun was prior to the shooting, who loaded it, was in that. We know nothing. And they have to have evidence. Ms. Michelin told you that they didn't do a trigger pull. They could have done a trigger pull on that gun and given you a poundage of how much force. I think Ms. Bradley had asked her, it's about just 5 pounds. But what did she tell Ms. Bradley? The trigger pull on that gun is as easy as popping off a soda cap.
Yeah.
Popping off a soda cap is enough force to pull the trigger on that gun. So the state wants you to believe that Mr. Bass did all these things. Well, because that's their theory, that's what they want you to believe. He got the gun, he racked it, he put the magazine in, he pulled the slide back, all of that.
There's no evidence
You
of
gotta
that.
look at the evidence, not their theory. Remember, the judge will tell you the evidence is where you look, the exhibits and the testimony. Not one piece of evidence about that.
She's right.
Ms. Reeder talked about the wallet being found next to ammo. I guess to presume that that's an important factor. Not any ammo that could have been used in this case for certain, because there's not one thing found in the master bedroom that had anything to do with a .380. Detective Hobelman and Corporal DeVoe both told you that. How do I know? How do I know that Mr. Bass's driver's license height is even correct? Not one shred of evidence presented as to that. They want you to read between the lines and assume. Whoever is holding the firearm had to be taller than 5'5". We know that, said Ms. Reeder. Where did you hear that evidence? What witness said that? No
She's
one
right.
did. Theory, not evidence. And again, going
Reasonable
through how
doubt.
he then afterwards goes into the master bedroom, does everything, puts the gun up, and closes the drawer, she said. Right? Evidence. That drawer's open, so that's not true. This is the way HCSO found it. That drawer is open. So what Ms. Reeder said there is not supported by the evidence.
Dang, this is tough.
There is
man.
not one shred of
Jeez.
evidence to support their theory and everything Ms. Reeder had just said to you. You've got to look at the evidence. You've got to look for the evidence. So let me go back then. In opening statement, Mr. Terry told you the following. Mr. Bass doesn't call 911. You will find out who he calls. Well, Shirley calls 911, or Mr. Evans actually calls 911 and gives the phone to Shirley. Shirley's calling 911. Why is there a reason for the spouse to call 911? You heard evidence, not theory, but evidence, that DeQuan and then Shirley, the call is made at 22:33, the 911 call. Mr. Bass does not call his mother until after that. Evidence, that's what you heard. Mr. Bass isn't calling Domino's to order a pizza. He's not calling for takeout. While Miss Bass is on the phone with 911, that is when Mr. Bass calls his mom to tell her what happened to her grandchildren. So we know from the timing that that call to the mother is definitely after the 22:33 911. Look at the phone records. It is 22:34, right after. We also know that it's a very quick call. 5 seconds may not have even have been answered by his mom. All right, number 2. Mr. Terry says, Mr. Bass tells the police exactly where to find that gun. Presuming, I guess, he knows specifically because he's the one that pulled the trigger. Well, no, not quite. And Ms. Reeder even pointed this out in their argument, is he's telling them that it's on the dresser. It's not until later that he says, look in or on the dresser. Ms. Reeder even told you that. And we have no evidence of where that gun was prior to the shooting. None at all. Ms. Reeder made a comment about Mr. Bass making the statements to the deputies that first responded. The statements are made mere minutes after the shooting. Well, the 911 call is at 22:33. The statements, she said it herself in her closing, 22:46. That's 13 minutes.
There it is. There's your 13 minutes.
Marital discord. Mr. Terry said, oh, there's marital discord, and maybe that's why he did this tragic, horrible act. What evidence did you hear of marital discord? Absolutely none. Again, you have to look to the evidence, not their theory. Because they have the burden of proof to prove beyond and to the exclusion of a reasonable doubt. You
Dang,
did not
she's
hear about
right.
any marital discord from China Gadsden, nor did you hear about any marital discord from Ms. Romeo. Mr. Terry said, you will never know why. He's correct, absolutely, when he says they do not have to prove motive. You will never know why. Well, we don't. And the problem is, there are so many unanswered questions over this tragic, terrible event that took place on August 29th of 2022.
Yeah.
Many unresolved questions, mistakes made in this case by many different people. Too many unresolved or answered questions. Reasonable doubt. Mr. Bass didn't go to Ruth Chris because he was supposed to stay home to take care of the children. Mr. Terry said that. Where'd you hear that? Did you hear that evidence? Stayed home because he had to take care of the children. No evidence. Nada. There was no evidence presented of why he did not go to Ruth Chris that evening.
Right, and so what we have ultimately is that there is no evidence, none.
Something is not right in that house. Okay? What evidence did you hear that there were any problems in the house? Nada.
Dang, she's cooking.
Mr. Terry, Mr. Bass was angry and aggressive on West Shore and 275 when he came upon Miss Bass and Miss Gadsden. Well, no, that's not what we heard. We specifically did not hear from China Gadsden say he was angry. You didn't hear that. Nada. She claims he comes upon them, and all he says, were you drinking? You know, is that why she's driving? That's it. They're not arguing, they're not beefing, he's not yelling. Shirley wasn't fazed by it, China said. And
This
that's
is
it.
all wrong, man. Dang.
And, folks, that's if you believe this story. Okay, we have China Gadsden, the one, she is related to Shirley. And one of the most critical things is, if this was a big deal, and this somehow is their great motive, theory, that's what they want you to believe to convict somebody of first-degree murder, why is it not talked about earlier? China Gadsden never says a word until over 14 months later that this allegedly took place. Corporal Gaveau even told you there would be times he would call China. She'd hang up on him. I don't want to talk to you. I'm not going to talk to you. All of the behavior of everybody in this case, Mr. Bass, Mrs. Bass, the witnesses, you can consider. And their behavior and everything that got done that evening. And China Gadsden never at any time said Shirley was upset. Now, I just want to make this comment. Do you honestly believe in Florida that they're sitting there, stopped in the middle of the road, And they're just sitting there, and Mr. Bass goes out, and he says, are you drinking? Were you drinking? Because is that why she's driving? That's it, right? That there's a ton of cars backed up, and that one person is honking. This is Florida. Not one person is honking or blaring, saying, you guys need to go. So China told you. Miss Bradley asked her, well, weren't the cars like honking if this story is true? Oh, no, it's fine. They were just waiting. Come on. It's just unbelievable. This was an act to kill, Mr. Terry said. Well, where's the evidence? Where is the evidence of premeditation, the intent to kill, reflection, enough time to reflect on that? Where is the evidence that the premeditation and intent to kill was in his mind before the act? We have no problems talked about, no issues, no evidence, none. No threats, nothing. Shirley was frantic on the 911 call, of course. She's frantic, she's upset. But you gotta look at her overall behavior in this case.
That's a great point.
That's
a great point.
Look at all of that. The 911 operator is constantly asking her, who did this? Who did this? Is the shooter still there? This is a mother. Supposedly, Mr. Bass has just shot and killed her daughter and shot her son. She refuses to answer that question. Never answers that question. At one point, Miss Bradley talked about this in her opening. She specifically says, no, I don't need police, I need an ambulance. And of course, you'll have a call to listen to. We also have absolutely no clue who she's yelling at on that call. We know for a fact from the call, she's definitely yelling at the 911 operator for not getting there fast enough to bring the ambulance. We know, and she says it, how upset she is with the operator. Look at when the call comes back. She even says, I got the same person. I got you again. So we know she's upset with the operator.
Wow.
And listen to that call. Did you catch the comment about what Shirley said? Her son was supposed to be sleeping, but then he ran. What? Okay. Well, that just further shows me we do not know what happened in that house at the time of the shooting.
We
or
don't,
what happened
man.
before. Listen to that call. You're going to hear her say that. And
She's
then he
right.
ran. Supposedly, as Miss Reeder says, the children are shot in their beds. That makes absolutely no sense. Now, we know from Mr. Evans, Daquan Evans, that there was about 5 to 10 minutes span of time. That's what he testified to. Evidence.
They need to
5 to
appeal
10 minutes
this.
from the time he heard the shots to Shirley coming to his door, because she doesn't know the address where she lives. She doesn't have her phone.
Wow.
5 to 10 minutes between the shots and Shirley coming to his door. What is going on in that 5 to 10 minutes? Ask yourself that. What is going on with Shirley, Mr. Bass, in those 5 to 10 minutes? We also know there's 2 parts of the call. There was no evidence presented by the states to show the time difference. In other words, was it 5 minutes between the calls? Was it 5 seconds? We don't know, because they didn't present that. And we certainly know, continuing in that second call, Shirley is still not happy with that operator. Take that in consideration as well as the first deputies at the scene. They're all equipped with body cam. Rahman, Rainey, White, and Jones. The big picture is what you can look at. Deputy Jones, I asked her repeatedly, who shot her son? He's asking a mother whose son has been
We
shot
talked
in
about
the
this.
head.
Yep.
Who shot your son? Is the person with the gun in the area, please.
And what'd she say?
Never. His testimony, evidence. Shirley never answered him, never answered his questions. Deputy White, evidence. The woman was yelling at the officers. We were just trying to help. Deputy White, Shirley was uncooperative in providing any answers. Evidence. Now, the state, I anticipate Mr. Terry's going to get an opportunity to come up and talk to you when I'm done.
She was
Please
very-
keep in mind what he says and think what I might say in rebuttal to that, and keep in mind he has the burden of proof. But I
Why was Shirley so uncooperative with the police? No phone, not getting on the witness stand, not answering questions. It doesn't make sense, y'all. It doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense. Again, I mentioned this in the comments. it's clear. It's clear that this is the parents' fault. I don't think anybody's questioning that. The parents did this. The question is, who pulled the trigger? And that's important to this case, especially when someone's facing the death penalty and premeditated murder. Now, if you want to talk about manslaughter, you want to talk about maybe first-degree murder, okay. Premeditated murder, there's too much isn't adding up. Too much.
I anticipate, since this is my only time to talk to you, he's going to say, well, she was traumatized, right? She's traumatized. So you got to look at that whole big picture about her uncooperativeness, and we'll talk more about that. But it doesn't explain this case and not answering simple questions posed to her by a 911 operator or the deputies. Who shot your son? My husband. Never, nada, never says that.
Never.
Deputy Jones. The lady wasn't very helpful. That's it. Not helpful at all. Now, Mr. Bass, another comment from opening statement by Mr. Terry. Mr. Bass never tells the police his daughter is upstairs. Not true. Evidence. You heard from Deputy White. Body cams, you got beeping going on, they're difficult to hear. Deputy White said that Mr. Bass did say something about a little girl, and he documented it in his report. It wasn't just off his body cam. He told you that. I heard that. What you kind of hear on the body cam is something like, anyone upstairs? No. Then you can hear something. Watch those body cams again. Something is said right after that. And I believe that Deputy Rainey's body cam may be one of the best to pick it all up. But listen for the word daughter. Then, is anyone else in the house? No. But I didn't make that up. Deputy White took that witness stand under oath and said he did say something about his little girl. But Mr. Bass is not allowed to be traumatized. Well, Shirley Bass is. You can't have your cake and eat it too. Now, Deputy Jones even told you, well, I didn't hear that. I didn't document it in my reports that he said no, but I was walking behind Deputy White. And I just walked quickly past Mr. Bass. And he specifically told you he might have heard something, Deputy White, that Deputy Jones did not. Evidence, that was his testimony, because Deputy Jones was behind Deputy White. Evidence, he told you that. So I ask that you watch those body cams again. I'm sure Mr. Terry will say the same thing. Now, let's continue on concerning Shirley Bass. Her daughter was killed in a tragic event. Her son was shot in the head. But she desires to be uncooperative with Detective Gabot. He asked for her phone. Remember, her phone was in the crime scene.
Here we go with the
Some
phone.
member of HTSO went into the crime scene, took her phone out, and gives it to her. So she has her phone back. Mr. Bass's phone, able to be downloaded, is on the couch. You can see it, right? He's asking, I want to download the phone. No. Never does she give her phone to him to do a simple download. And guess what, folks?
Why?
You saw phone evidence, right? Now, I believe it was Corporal Gabot said there wasn't anything on Mr. Bass's actual download, but that's why they look at it. That's why they do a cell write. Because it does reveal evidence, and it is important. She was hard to reach, he told you. This is a woman whose daughter was killed and son was shot in the head. Mary Lee House. You heard about Mary Lee House. It's kid-friendly. There's just the interviewer that works at Mary Lee House who's trained to speak to children in a kid-friendly environment. They have to do, and they want to do, an interview of JJ based on what happened, what he saw, what he did. On 9/7 of 2022 in the AM, Shirley absolutely refused to let her son be interviewed. Now, the state's going to say, oh, Corporal Gabot said he was just out of the hospital. Well, then say that.
This
Can we wait
is
a
crazy.
little bit? No. She lies to Corporal Gabot. You heard that. And said, well, I got here earlier, and I waited a long time. Remember he told you that? What else did he tell you? That's not true. Because I was here early, and she was not here. So we know that's false.
That doesn't make sense either. Why wouldn't she let her kid talk to the police? Yo, I'm done. That's the last time I'll say it. Okay, that's a lie. That's not the last tape I'm going to say. Also, I need to correct myself. when it comes to the death penalty, he's not facing the death penalty, but he's going to get a mandatory life sentence without the possibility of parole, he being Jermaine Bass. Initially, the prosecution was going to ask for the death penalty, but they withdrew their petition for that. So he's just looking out life without the possibility of parole. Shirley Bass's behavior makes zero sense in all of this. Absolutely zero. Why wouldn't you let your son be interviewed? Why wouldn't you give your phone? Why, Shirley? Why, Shirley? Why? Nothing she did makes sense. What Jermaine Bass did and said, to me, honestly, even if you take Shirley out of it, it makes sense. He's saying, I did it. He's saying it was an accidental discharge. Why would he say that? The only way he could say that, the only reason he would say that is because he's trying to protect someone. Is he trying to protect himself? Is he trying to protect his son? Is he trying to protect Shirley? That's the question we have to ask.
And Corporal Gabeau, what other interesting thing did you hear about that first attempt to interview JJ? Oh, I never even saw the son. He doesn't know if she even brought him that day. So he says, okay. And so he set it for the afternoon, same day, September 7th of 2022, for the PM. Now at this point, JJ's uncooperative. We didn't hear testimony.
It doesn't make any
pain,
sense.
Or he was upset. Look what had just happened to his sister. We don't hear that. What do we hear? And I hate to even talk about JJ like this. I'm just going to tell you the evidence, please. Corporal Gabeau tells you the interview did not take place, that second attempt, because he was disrespectful, had bad behavior, and was actually physically attacking Shirley. Then we have another attempt. Well, let's try to do it on 9/12 of 22. It's now reset for the third time. That interview didn't take place. We know at that point, Detective Burnell and Detective O'Toole have to go get an investigative subpoena. Corporal Gabeau told you all about that. It isn't an invitation, Corporal told you. It was served on her on September 23rd of 2022. So finally, I think this is the fourth attempt at this point. You know, not Shirley, just give me some time. No. Excuses, excuses, excuses. Finally now, only over a threat of being arrested if she doesn't bring JJ in, does the interview take place. This behavior is not consistent with a woman whose husband just in cold blood, premeditated, shot his daughter, Shirley's daughter, 3 times and shot her son in the head.
Yes, it's consistent with a woman who has something to hide. What is she hiding?
Absolutely no sense. Corporal Gabeau told you she was uncooperative with the investigation. Some things she was cooperative with, he told you. He didn't quite tell you what those things were, but she was uncooperative. Just the same as you've heard from every single deputy that took that stand, the first responders. He also said, quote, Shirley was uncooperative with all attempts to have her son interviewed. What is going on here? What exactly happened in that home? What is going on? Do you really know, beyond and to the exclusion of all reasonable doubt, what happened in that apartment, that townhouse, for that gun to be shot and the children to be injured? Mr. Terry, in opening, Shirley was very frantic. He also seems to imply in his opening, but Mr. Bass wasn't, right? Shirley is frantic on the body cams. We see her. But nobody has met Shirley before and doesn't know how she acts. Nobody has met Mr. Bass before and see how he acts. Not Mr. Evans, not the deputies. We talked in Bordier, if you remember this. Do people act differently to trauma? You guys agreed, yes, you can. No two people are alike.
Right.
You can be frantic, or you can be like a blank slate and in shock. It sounds like Mr. Bass and Shirley as well. So people react differently to traumatic events.
This lawyer is good. She's really good.
And certainly,
I gotta give it to her.
Blank and quiet. The words of Mr. Evans to describe Shirley Bass describes Mr. Bass. In addition, you can consider what everyone else told you from the Sheriff's Department concerning Mr. Bass. Unlike Shirley Bass, he was cooperative with the investigation in all stages. Now, we also know that we hear Mr. Bass tells the deputies, come in, come in. You can literally see, watch the body cam. He's all sweaty. You can see the shine because he's sweat from trauma. Just help my child, please. I believe Ms. Ryu just said in her closing that he never asks for help or to help his children. Absolutely false. Just help my child, please, please get the paramedics. Again, evidence from the body cams. Mr. Terry, in his opening.
This is wild,
Mr.
man.
Bass said it was an accident. This was no accident. Did y'all notice that when Mr. Bass is first asked by the deputies how this happened, what does he say? He says accidental discharge. That's what he says to me first. He doesn't say, I did it, I shot it. He says accidental discharge.
We caught that.
It's a period of time. Deputy Rainey steps outside. He notifies that they have found Jayla. And then the house is clear. Comes back in the house. They're frantically taking care of the children. Fire rescue is coming in. Later, when Deputy Rainey is asking more specific questions, then, and only then, does Mr. Bass says, it was me, I was cleaning the gun. Common sense dictates no one's going to be cleaning a gun in the kids' room. What is going on in that house? What happened in that house that tragic evening?
What happened?
No. You didn't
What
see him cleaning
happened?
supplies out, did you? I submit to you, he was not in the kids' room cleaning the gun. He was protecting someone else. It just makes absolutely no sense. And evidence that you have is that we do know that there was a substantial period of time, 5 to 10 minutes between the shots and Shirley coming to ask to use Mr. Evans' phone. Why she's even doing that, I don't know, because her phone is in the townhouse where it's retrieved by one of the members and given back to her. And we know there's a gap in the calls. What did Mr. and Mrs. Bass discuss in that time period? Is Mr. Bass protecting someone?
Dang.
We don't know. Questions unanswered. That is when you have not proved your case beyond and to the exclusion of a reasonable doubt. So based on some of those things that we have just talked about, do you believe that this case has been proved beyond and to the exclusion of all reasonable doubt?
No. There is so much reasonable doubt here. Again, the reasonable doubt is who pulled the trigger. It's not whose fault is it that it happened. Shirley and Jermaine's. Clearly, no doubt about that. The reasonable doubt is who pulled the trigger. Who pulled the trigger? I don't see man, I'm not seeing the evidence that points to beyond a reasonable doubt that he was the one that did it.
You have to look to the state for those answers. You have come away, or we submit you kind of have come away with more questions than anything else. Please keep in mind as well, we do not have to provide you, the law says, and try to explain who pulled that trigger, what happened, how the shooting took place. Remember, you need to look to the state for the evidence. We do not have to give you scenarios, explain what happened, discuss what happened. You have to say, did the state prove this beyond the exclusion of a reasonable doubt?
They didn't.
So I want to talk about the law just a little bit, because we talked extensively in voir dire. Remember,
They need to try this in Georgia.
You go back to that jury room. Keep in mind that it must be completely removed. We know we have a person and they're clothed in that presumption. That's our law in this country. It must be removed completely in order for you to consider a guilty verdict, in order to convict. Now, please don't be misled. There are no percentages in the jury instructions, but it's a way to kind of explain it to you. The presumption of innocence must be taken off of Mr. Bass 100%, right? Because that's the only way they can carry their burden and prove their case. If it's removed 50%, there's reasonable doubt. If it's removed 75%, there's reasonable doubt. If the state has only reviewed it,
Judge, I'm
removed
going
it
to object to this
95%.
line of argument.
Sustained. There's no specific percentage as relates to reasonable doubt. It's an abiding conviction of guilt.
And as I told you, please don't be misled. Now, what is reasonable doubt? The judge gave the definition of it. She talked in voir dire about it and told you it's basically a doubt you can attach a reason to. It comes from the evidence, a conflict, or lack of evidence. Now, like Ms. Bradley told you in opening, this was tragic. Members of the jury had to see the photographs, listen to the evidence. Tragic. That was a tragedy, what happened that evening to those children. But you cannot let sympathy affect your verdict. I know it's hard. You cannot. The judge instructed you of that. You cannot let sympathy or bias affect your verdict. You must follow the law. And the question you need to answer is, has the state removed that presumption of innocence completely? And if they have not,
No.
the verdict has to be not guilty. That's our law. Ms. Reeder and Mr. Terry have done their jobs. And because they've done their jobs and presented evidence does not mean they are able, through the evidence, to remove that presumption. That's going to be that's up to you guys. As the judge told you in the jury instructions, I believe you have the copies, you get to go back there, the presumption of innocence must be overcome by the evidence beyond and to the exclusion of a reasonable doubt. And also remember, the abiding conviction of guilt and conviction of guilt. Judge gave you the instruction, we talked about it in voir dire, you have the instruction. That part of the instruction starts off talking what reasonable doubt, which is a concept sometimes hard to define, is what we talked in voir dire about. It's not a possible or speculative doubt. I told you that. However, if after carefully, or on the other hand, I believe it says, on the other hand, after carefully considering and weighing the evidence, there is not an abiding conviction of guilt, or if you have a conviction of guilt, but it is not stable, it wavers and vacillates. That means, and shows you the charge has not been proven beyond and to the exclusion of all reasonable doubt, and the law requires, it's tough in a case like this, but the law requires a not guilty verdict. That was what we were talking about. Mr. Terry, I stole from him in voir dire when he used the waver and vacillating to talk about premeditation. Same thing. You go into your closet that morning and you're trying to decide what to wear, and you can't quite decide. It's waver and vacillating, going back and forth. And if you can even have a conviction of guilt. No abiding conviction of guilt or conviction of guilt, but not wavers or vacillates. It has to be by law, not guilty. So if you go back in the jury room and you're thinking to yourself, well, he's possibly guilty, he may be guilty, he could very well be guilty, he's probably guilty,
Wow.
then you're having a reasonable doubt. Then please keep in mind that we do not have to have proved Mr. Bass's innocence, rebutted anything that was said. I think we showed you quite a bit, and a lot of the problems and errors in this case. But at this point now, we're at Wednesday, there's just too many questions in this case to overcome that presumption of innocence. And those questions have not been answered. You cannot look at Ms. Reeder or Mr. Terry's theory. Evidence, evidence, evidence. As I said in jury selection, what does not guilty mean in our country? Well, that's exactly what it means. Not guilty means the state has not proved their case beyond to the exclusion of a reasonable doubt. So with our laws, do you have to sit there and go, I'm totally convinced he didn't pull the trigger? That's when I say not guilty. No. Our law says if the state has not proven their case beyond to the exclusion of a reasonable doubt and remove that presumption of innocence through evidence, not theory, then you have to, by law, return the not guilty verdict. The state has to prove who did it and has to prove Mr. Bass acted with premeditation or felony murder. You have the instructions with you. So I want to just talk a little bit then about the crime scene, the autopsy, and they all present holes in the state's case. Let me start off with Dr. Riley. Mr. Terry said to Dr. Riley in his direct examination, and Dr. Riley agreed, were you there the entire time for the autopsy? Yes, I was there. I wrote the quote. I was there with Dr. McGowan the entire time. Well, no, that's false. We know that's not true. We presented that to you. I said, whoa, hold up. Again, we didn't have to do this. I go up and I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. You weren't, were you? You were in and out. You had other autopsies going on while this autopsy was taking place. That is correct.
Uh-oh.
And I had other things to do as well. But yet he told you, oh yeah, I was there with him the entire time on direct. Dr. McGowan did the autopsy. Dr. McGowan did the report. Then we have the interesting issue of Dr. Riley, and I'll explain in a minute why all this is important, and then we'll talk about the other mistakes in this case. Dr. Riley testified under oath in his
She's still cooking.
that gunshot wounds A and B on Jayla, Ms. Jayla Bass, were slightly downward. He took an oath. He testified they were slightly downward. That's what's written in an official document, the official autopsy report. So it's in the autopsy report. He testifies under oath. That's wrong. What else could be wrong? For this autopsy, he was doing other things, doing other autopsies. It's important. So it's wrong at least twice. You heard that. And it's funny because my last thing to him was, but didn't I even ask you in your deposition when you were under oath, did you find any errors in that report? And you said no, and I think his exact words were, this is something I would say. Right. So Mr. Terry gets back up on redirect, but does that have anything to do with the cause and manner of death? And Dr. Riley says, no, I have not changed my cause and manner of death. From the autopsy he did not conduct. Why does it matter? What the autopsy showed matters. What the autopsy didn't show matters. Stippling matters. Direction matters. Where a person is shooting a gun that he can testify or not testify to matters. His findings matter. What else is wrong? What else is incomplete? And this is the type of evidence that Mr. Terry and Ms. Reeder would claim they have carried their burden of proof with. Dr. Riley, honest with you on these points. I cannot tell you who pulled the trigger. I cannot even tell you where the shooter was. Remember Ms. Reeder? Oh, the shooter was standing right next to the bed. It's Mr. Bass, and he puts his arm over and reaches and shoots. You heard no evidence of that. You heard to the contrary. Dr. Riley says, I cannot tell you where the shooter was. Who else said that? Anna Cox. I can't tell you where the shooter was. I can't tell you any of that. So what is all this? Theory, not evidence. Now, this is very important when it comes to the stippling, because they're talking about there's no stippling on Jayla's wounds. Dr. Riley said, there's no evidence based on what he sees for close-range firing. And he told you that is the only thing that indeterminate range means. What else did he tell you, though? There are many variables and numerous factors that can affect the leaving of stippling. Number one, the type of firearm itself, which, by the way, he wasn't even aware of what type of firearm. Number two, the type of the firearm. So the firearm itself and how it works, and then the type, 38, 9, 57. And it depends on how much gunpowder is in the cartridge of the ammo. So these are all factors that he is telling you, evidence, affects whether you can see stippling or not. No further testing was done by HCSO to fire the gun and see that gun with that specific ammo where you see stippling or if you see stippling. Now, State wants to also talk about distance. Ms. Reeder, I think, said something about Mr. Bass puts the gun right up to them or to their heads, something like that. I specifically asked him, are you able to give us an opinion on how far, in this case, the end of the muzzle, so where obviously a lot of you guys know about firearms, where it ejects, was to Jayla's gunshot wounds? That's your distance. In this case, I cannot tell you that. I have no opinion. Remember that? Evidence. When he's talking about, well, generally you'll see stippling under 3 feet or under 2 feet. Generally. Typically. But I need the firearm. I need the ammo. And of course he doesn't do that kind of stuff. HCSO would be responsible for actually testing that firearm. So, and of course we have no evidence concerning little JJ in that field. So, keep all of that with a grain of salt and remember what Dr. Riley really said. Shannon Bader and Clay Hoberman. What other errors did we have? Why is it important? Guarantee you, Mr. Terry's going to get up here, and anything I said about what about this, what about this, what about this, you have questions not answered. He's going to say that doesn't matter. I have to prove that Jayla is dead, and we've agreed to that. Clearly, it was Jayla Bass. He's got to prove the elements of the crime. But you look at the whole big picture. How was the evidence collected from the scene? They relied very heavily on Ms. Cox's opinion. I'll get to her in just a minute. But here's something pretty critical. Shannon Bader made a mistake. She puts in her report, she puts on property receipts, and she says in her deposition under oath that projectile was taken from the bottom bunk mattress. So what would that make that look like then, right? It makes it almost look like she's telling you, or the evidence at the time, is that one of the shots or two of the shots, what have you, are on the bottom bunk as well. So that's her mistake and what her mistake led to. That's important. That's important. Because we know that's not the case. But yet when you look at this, wait, what is their scene saying? I think Ms. Reader said it 5 or 6 times. What is the scene telling you? What is the scene telling you? The Sheriff's Department collects a metal clip, evidence marker 1, for like gauze if a person has a wrapped up arm or something like that, a little metal clip. And they collect, or they document it. I wasn't sure if they collected it or just documented a piece of gauze on the top of the staircase. That was important enough to do. But what wasn't important enough? Let's go over that. Gunshot residue testing. You have the kits, you can do it, and then send it off for testing, which they told you they can do, but they did not do. Now, I believe Ms. Reader or Mr. Terry was talking to, I think, Corporal Gabot today. And he says, well, you wouldn't bother to do that on Mr. Bass because he admitted he shot the firearm. And he said, well, yeah, that's why I didn't bother with him. What about everybody else? Everybody else was at the scene. The medical examiner's office had some sort of question concerning, you heard about this, whether they should swab poor little Jayla's hands. Because her hands are bagged to protect it. What did Clay Holberman say when he spoke to somebody at the medical examiner? Nah, we don't need any special processing. We're not worried about that. So there's a lot more to that picture. There's only one swab done on that entire top mattress, and that's the swab over towards the pillow that came back as little JJ. One swab is done on the entire, and I'm only speaking of top of the mattress, to determine or try to determine possible positions of the children. I asked Detective Holberman, well, why wouldn't you do, look at all that blood. Why wouldn't you do some other swabs? I'm not talking about the frame, I'm not talking about the wall. I'm not talking about the staircase, where we know we have little JJ's blood. Why would you not send out some more swabs? You have blood on the east end, in the middle, and on the west end. We can tell from the evidence Jayla is clearly somewhere near the pillow, yes. But I asked him, why did you only send swabs for the magazine, the trigger grip, the slide, and the one swab that Anna Cox wanted done on the comforter? Well, it would take too long. It takes a good 12 months to process things. I wouldn't have had it ready for trial. So that's why I didn't bother. That was his answer. I don't make this stuff up. That was his answer. What did I talk with Ms. Weinstein? I hope it is. I'm not mispronouncing that. We talked about her reports, right? 3 months. And that's 3 months from the evidence coming into FDLE, being in their evidence vault, eventually making its way to her area, being processed, filing a report, and authoring a written report. 3 months. On pretty much everything she did. There was plenty of time to process this scene better, so maybe you would have your questions answered. This was mid-2022. It is 2.5 years later. The only swabs that are done on the frame, not where B is, where they saw a substance. We saw red substance on the frame all down on the east end. And I'll get to the comforter in this Cox in a minute. All swabbing over there. I'm not talking about swabbing on the west end, where clearly we have the coagulation and where little Jayla is shot. We have it on the west end. We have it in the middle. We have it on the east end. We have it on the walls and the frame. Look at that east side. Not one swab done. That would help us with movement. That would help us know. Now, Anna Cox, who does 70% of her work for prosecutor's office and police agency, she wants you to believe that every bit of blood on that comforter, because we only have the O tested, and then we have the impact spatter up on top, the one area of impact spatter, which has Jayla's DNA, and a limited inclusion for little JJ. You have the DNA results. But she's telling you that every single bit of blood in the middle of that mattress and going all the way to the east side, that's all from the comforter. You saw multiple pictures of that comforter. It's in different spots, even in the picture. Walls, frame, and mattress. We know it's moved by first responders. If you see in the body cam, it's kind of next to her legs. There's a picture with the comforter You'll have the pictures back there, laying in the middle of the bed. Remember that? And I almost said, well, there's a U-shaped here. It was kind of spread out. And there's a whole bunch of blood right here that's not even touching this comforter. Oh, look at the whole sequence of photos, Miss Cox says. You have the photos. Then we see a photograph of it way over on the east wall. That's the preservation of their scene. Multiple locations of one piece of evidence. And guess what? Detective Holdeman had absolutely no idea that first responders had moved that comforter, moving evidence in the crime scene, until I told him. I told him in deposition. It's in the body cams. He didn't know that. And he's a scene detective. We had to tell the crime scene detective in
They
a
did interview
homicide
the
case
neighbors,
where
yeah.
children are shot. These things. That's a problem. That's a problem. We know that they had the issue with the label of the B. They thought B went through the wall and was B1 and B2. That's a simple mistake. They moved the bunk bed away, and they could tell that B is not related to B1 and B2. Right? Yet Anna Cox sounded very sure of herself. In fact, I think Miss Reader used the term, she taught you. If you'll happen to notice as well, she appeared to be the only witness in this case who continued talking after the question had been answered. Everybody else answered the question as they should. But here's what's critical. Jayla's head and Jermaine's head, and possibly his hand, was at the northwest corner. Why? Why are you so convinced of that? Because of that one area, P, the impact spatter. That's why she's convinced. He said, well, all gunshot wounds aren't going to leave impact spatter. Oh, yes, they will. Generally, you're going to leave the common sense at the door. You don't have to leave it at the door. She was even aware that P, the impact spatter spot, was a limited, little Jermaine was included in a limited capacity. And you have the stipulation on that. So then I said to her, well, look, all right, she's processing a scene which had been not done 100% correctly by HCSO. Some mistakes are made. You can't give us the exact position of Jayla and little JJ's head, correct? Oh, yes, I can. It was in the northwest corner. I'm like, okay. And she said it again and again. I said, hold up. That's not what you told me in deposition under oath just December of last year. That's not what she said. I had to show her her own words. She said, proximity of the northwest corner, I cannot give you the exact position, just somewhere in the proximity of the northwest corner. So she said in December, under oath, she comes in, teaches you, shows you her PowerPoint. Oh no, yeah, no, their heads are definitely there. You can consider that. And of course, none of this that we're even talking about so far about the crime scene and the autopsy is telling you to pull the trigger. So you can consider all of that. Talking about Ms. Cox, don't you think if the sheriff's department had seen biological material, and somebody would have mentioned it, somebody would have put it in a report, somebody would have had that tested? She looks at some pictures, photos only, and says, oh, that's biological material there. Well, do we know? Is there DNA done? Do we have any idea? Just a picture. Well, no, that's what it looks like to me in my experience. It was also interesting because she said something about drips of blood by the couch. I guess away from the couch, because you know Mr. Bass is sitting there cradling his son. The officers all told you.
Right.
There's blood coming down. She said something about some drops. That's not documented by Bader or Holdeman. The green scale marker on the ground there shows what you decide. It looks like a little footprint. We know that's the area in which Mr. Bass brings his son down and sits down on the couch. You didn't hear about little droplets on the floor from the sheriff's department.
Nope.
And you know what? I guess even if they were there, like she said, that's understandable through the evidence. We know for a fact Mr. Bass brought his child down. Just like the blood that's down the staircase and all that, all understandable, all explainable, and she told you that. Why wasn't anything done at all with the swabs taken for the gunshot residue? The comforter, wherever it is, it's more towards the left, could have been right under where that gun was. where the gun's being fired. In fact, I think Ms. Reader says kind of that it's lifting over, going right on top of it, to show us positions. But why wasn't anything done then at all? Well, we don't know. They took swabs for gunshot residue. They did infrared light, did nothing with it at all. I believe I asked, it was Detective Holberman or Corporal Gabo, further testing could have been done. FTLE results. Item 7, the magazine, and item 8, the grip and the trigger, have the son's DNA. Now, I've been working with Mr. Turi a long time. I can kind of predict what he's going to say. Keep in mind again what I would say when he gets up here. But I presume he's going to claim, oh, it's just some sort of transfer. The fact that DNA, the biological profile of that little boy, is on the actual grip, trigger, and magazine of that gun. What happened in that house?
Did y'all hear that? How? How is that possible? On the grip and the handle? And they didn't test it? Crazy. That's
Transfer
evidence,
all those
as she
sauces,
says.
Mr. Jerry? All of them are just transferred? Well,
Reasonable doubt.
those statistics? No. No. I even asked Ms. Weinstein what the actual statistic was for little JJ's DNA on the grip trigger in the magazine. Because she capped it at 700 billion, which understandable, it's greater than 700 billion. They don't bother reporting in their report, they put it in their notes, what the actual statistic is. So I asked her, what is the actual statistic for the trigger for the son's DNA? Way more than 700 billion, 640 quintillion. I had to ask her how many zeros that was. Can't remember if she said 20 or 30. You guys rely on your own memory. With those
a lot.
statistics, we ain't looking at transfer, folks. What happened that night in that house?
We know what
Magazine,
happened.
310 trillion. Not with those statistics. Ms. Weinstein did tell you that they typically say, I expect the donor to be there. She flat out told you I would expect Mr. Bass's DNA to be on that gun. He would be an expected profile, and he was. It's his gun. So the state wants to focus you on that. Well, his DNA's on the gun. That means he committed this crime. Absolutely not. What did FTLE also say about the magazine? Mr. Terry, when he was questioning Ms. Weinstein, said, so Shirley's DNA is not even on the magazine, right? I objected. On cross, I asked, no, I can't include or exclude her. I'm not saying her DNA wasn't there. On the magazine, Shirley cannot be included as being a donor or excluded as being a source of the DNA on the magazine. And the FTLE analyst cannot tell you anyone did not touch that gun that evening. But what else is important that she told you? There are actually ways to do statistics, because we heard the statistics, 1 in 600 trillion, 1 in 700 billion, for it to be some other unrelated person. I said, wait a minute. We keep saying unrelated when we know this is a biological family. Are there statistics that can be done when it involves related persons? Oh, absolutely.
That's what I think,
there
Amy.
There could be a way to do the statistics.
I'm going to stand
when
on
we
it.
have related people involved. But we didn't do it in this case. FTLE's not doing that. Everyone's related. Why didn't they do it? We don't know what the statistics may have been. On the magazine, we had little Jayla included when running the program in StarMix. She uses StarMix, she puts a profile in, it helps her sort out the contributors. She ran it as a 2-person mixture. And Jayla at that point was included, 25,000. That's a much lower statistic. But she told you, and I had to ask her this, wait a minute, couldn't you have chosen to run item 7, the profile in the magazine, as a 3-person mixture and StarMixed? And I showed her, we talked about her correspondence. She questioned whether she should have done that. She ran it, she chose to run it in the StarMix program as a 2-person mixture. That is her subjective doing. I'm running it as a 2-person mixture, and now in the end, we only have JJ and Mr. Bass. So we talked about her correspondence with her supervisor. And she said, yeah, we did discuss this, and I made the decision I'm going to keep it as a two-person mixture. Ms. Michelin was our last witness. The gun that ejected the casings was that gun located in the master bedroom. And according to Ms. Michelin, to pull the trigger on that gun is like opening a soda cap with a little metal clip. Now, Ms. Reeder, in her closing, is like, well, you have to do this, and you have to do this, and you have to load the gun, and you have to rack the slide, and you have to do all this. There's no way a child could have done all that. I'm presuming that's what they're saying. All three safety mechanisms on that gun are joint. That's what you heard. So when you pull that trigger,
It's
the
nasty.
three safety mechanisms on that gun in different areas disengage. The only thing you have to do is you pull that little thing that's in front of the trigger, but right by each other, and you pull it.
It's a
You don't
Glock.
have to keep racking the slide. You just pull it back, like popping a can of soda. And remember, we don't have to show you scenarios. We don't have to say we believe this is what happened or we believe this isn't what happened. You have to look to the state and say, did you prove that Mr. Bass pulled that trigger and did it with premeditation or felony murder? Because we could probably sit here all day and talk about scenarios. We're not going to do that.
I don't think they
It
proved
is
it,
very
yo.
strange what's in that kid's room. A baby little bassinet right in front of the bunk bed with, I guess she called it a clip to the magazine, is in that baby bassinet. What was going on in that room? No processing was done on it at all to see whose DNA, whose fingerprints might have left that right there. It was a purse in the kid's closet. I didn't make up the word purse. It is documented as a purse. A purse is in the kid's closet, a magazine, a holster, and .380 ammo. The same type of, I believe with the shots, there's like Hornaday and Norma. The same type of ammo. There's a full box in there that could have been used in that gun. The purse is not collected. Well, I find this little clip being important, so let's make sure, we take care of that or we do this with gauze, but let's not collect the purse, test it for DNA, ask people about whose purse it is, test it for prints to determine whose purse that is, and how in the world did it get in those poor child's closet?
How?
We don't know. And it's tragic. We don't know. The witness, I can't remember who I was talking to about it, must have been Bader or Hobelman. Yes, it was extremely odd to see this. So we have the sheriff's department documenting tons of stuff in the master bedroom, right? The gun, absolutely. The wallet, yes. But they're collecting all sorts of stuff out of that master bedroom, right? None of it had anything to do with this case. So that's important enough to do for them. I asked Corporal straight out, can you shoot 9mm, because that's what most of it was, 9mm, and then there were some bigger ones, in a .380. No, you cannot. Had absolutely nothing to do with this, but let's focus on that. Let's not focus on why in the world those items were in the children's room and why was the purse in the closet, where it's even a little tough to see when you look at the picture. And you have the pictures, and I had to ask, I believe it was Detective Hobelman about that. The only .380 items, which is what goes in this gun, were in that purse in the kid's room. That ammo box in the purse, a holster, the clip. Did you swap it? Did you print it? Why is it in the kid's room? Who does it belong to see who touched those items? No, didn't do that. We were more concerned about all this non-related stuff in the master bedroom. Jennifer Michelin told you that they could have done a trigger pull to give you the exact trigger pull for that firearm. Because all firearms are specific and different, and you gotta look at that firearm. Just like Dr. Riley told you. Everything with stippling depends on all these variables. We do not have any evidence of that firearm, with that specific ammo being tested to see any stippling pattern. Nothing.
Why?
We have no evidence to know.
Why is that the
She
case?
told you, I think she was honest with you in all her testimony. We could have done it. It wasn't done. She was the one that talked to you about how all the three safety mechanisms disengage, and then you have the little safety thing in front that's like right in front of the trigger. All you gotta do is pull the trigger. There's no testimony that you heard or any evidence you heard about whether that gun was loaded or not and whether there was one in the chamber. So if you're sitting here, like Ms. Reeder says, you have to take it out, you gotta put the magazine in, you gotta rack the chamber, get it loaded. You heard no evidence of any of that. We don't know where that gun came from, how it got into the kid's room, who shot it, who is Mr. Bass protecting. We don't have any evidence. None. None. But we can't sit back there and assume, oh, well, children wouldn't have been able to do that because you gotta do this and you gotta do this. No. The lead detective in this case did not even know there was a box of .380 ammo in that kid's room. He found out during trial. Somebody told him, and that's fine. There's no problem. Somebody told him that. He didn't even know. He had no idea. He also testified, Corporal Gabot, under oath in his search warrant, under oath in his depot, and made another mistake concerning the timing on the video. And he talked to you about that. And he admitted all that he had made a mistake, and his testimony under oath is not accurate. But Ms. Michelin told you, it is like opening a can of soda. An adult can fire that firearm, a child can fire that firearm. And it's so funny, Ms. Reeder made a big deal in her closing about how Jennifer Michelin used both hands to hold that gun. She's a firearms expert. She's a grown adult woman. She has to be safe too when she's at the sheriff's department. That's not what we're talking about here. Of course she's going to be safe and hold it with two. She didn't tell you, oh, I had to because of the way it was recoiling. Nope, none of that. Her testimony was what you heard, a can of soda. These aren't mere possibilities. This isn't speculation. This is their evidence.
It's the evidence.
This is their evidence that they want you to remove the presumption of innocence with. And they have not. Do you know what happened that evening? A lot of details we don't know. Many details we don't know. So, when the state has not, through no fault of Ms. Reeder and Mr. Cherry, that is the evidence, have not proven this case beyond and to the exclusion of reasonable doubt. I know it's hard. This was tragic. But the law requires a not guilty verdict, and that's what not guilty means. The state just hasn't proven to me beyond and to the exclusion of a reasonable doubt. There's too many questions and too many things we clearly do not know.
I agree.
So when the state has not proven their case beyond and to the exclusion of a reasonable doubt, you mark not guilty. Remember, that's what not guilty means. You don't have to be sitting here going, oh no, I'm positive he didn't do it, and that's what not guilty means. No, the state has not proven their case. Not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. Trial's almost over. Mr. Cherry's going to get an opportunity to come back and talk to you. Please give him the attention you've given me as well. Remember what he says and what I might say in rebuttal to that. You got to ask yourself, do they prove to you that you know what happened in that house, that tragic evening? And I wish they prove it happened. And on behalf of Ms. Bradley, and most importantly, Mr. Jermaine Bass, we want to thank you for being with us last Friday and all of this week. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you.
And we ask that you find him not guilty. Dang, that was a missed opportunity right there. Great closing arguments by the defense. She pointed out everything that we've been saying as we've gone through this trial. The story doesn't add up. The story doesn't make sense. And for him to say initially it's accidental discharge, somebody helped my son, he was concerned about helping the kids. And then he's like, okay, well, I did it. It doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. I think he's protecting someone, whether you want to say it's himself, Shirley, or his son, which is horrible to think about. Something isn't adding up in this story, and it's clear we don't know what really happened. Y'all let me know what you think in the comments and in the chat.